Most people believe that saving more money will eventually make retirement feel safe. If they just add a little more, if they just reach the next milestone, if they just push a few more years, then the worry will stop. But for many retirees, that moment never arrives. Even after decades of saving, they still hesitate before spending. They still feel uneasy when markets move. They still wonder whether every decision is a mistake. And that creates a confusing question. If more money doesn't bring peace of mind, what's missing? Over 15 years of working with retirees, I've encountered this pattern more times than I can count. Someone walks in with a portfolio that most people would consider impressive. $700,000, $1 million, sometimes more. They've done everything the conventional wisdom told them to do. They saved consistently. They avoided debt. They lived responsibly. They reached numbers most people only talk about. And yet, they feel just as anxious as those with far less. The conversation always starts the same way. Do I have enough? And when I ask them what enough means, they struggle to answer. They don't know how much they can safely spend. They don't know how their money will support their actual life. They don't know what happens if something goes wrong. They just know they feel uncertain. And they assume the solution is to save even more. The problem wasn't discipline, it wasn't intelligence, and it wasn't effort. It was the assumption that saving more automatically solves uncertainty. It doesn't. Because retirement stress is rarely caused by a lack of money. It's caused by a lack of clarity. When people focus only on growing a balance, they ignore how that money will actually be used. They assume the future will somehow sort itself out. But when retirement arrives, the questions become very real. How much can I safely spend this year? What happens if markets fall? What if expenses rise unexpectedly? What if I live longer than I planned? Without clear answers, even a large portfolio can feel fragile. I've sat with people who have over $1 million saved and they're living on $40,000 per year, even though they could comfortably spend $60,000. Why? Because they don't trust their understanding of what's sustainable. They don't know where the line is between safe and unsafe spending. So they stay far away from any potential edge, just to be certain. That's not financial security. That's self-imposed restriction. This is why some people with substantial savings still live cautiously. They delay purchases. They avoid travel. They second-guess generosity. Not because they can't afford it, but because they don't know where the boundaries are. Saving more doesn't define boundaries. Structure does. Retirees who feel comfortable usually understand three things: which income is reliable, which expenses are flexible, and which risks actually matter. Those who don't understand these things often feel trapped, regardless of how much they save. Let me give you a concrete example. Two retirees, both with $900,000 saved. Same starting point. The first retiree knows that Social Security will cover $25,000 of annual expenses. They know their essential expenses total $40,000. They know their portfolio needs to generate $15,000 per year, which is less than 2% of their balance. They feel calm. They understand their structure. They know exactly how much flexibility they have. The second retiree has the same $900,000. But they haven't done this analysis. They just see a big number. They don't know how it translates into daily life. They don't know how much they can withdraw without creating problems. So they guess. And guessing creates anxiety. Same money. Completely different experiences. Another reason saving more doesn't always help is timing. Many people save aggressively late in their careers. They increase contributions, they delay retirement, they push harder. But if that extra saving all ends up in accounts that are difficult to use efficiently, the stress remains. More money doesn't automatically mean more usable money. Taxes, withdrawal rules, and income thresholds all affect how savings translate into lifestyle. If every withdrawal feels complicated, saving more just creates a bigger problem to manage. I've seen retirees with very high balances who feel constrained because their income feels unpredictable. They don't know how much a withdrawal will really cost after taxes. They don't know how it will affect their healthcare premiums. They don't know whether it will trigger future consequences. So they avoid using their savings. That's not financial security. That's hesitation. I worked with someone who had accumulated $1.8 million almost entirely in traditional IRAs. On paper, they were wealthy, but every time they considered a withdrawal, they had to calculate the tax impact, the effect on their Social Security taxation, the potential Medicare premium increase. A $30,000 withdrawal could easily trigger $6,000 in additional taxes and premium adjustments. That complexity was exhausting, and it made them reluctant to use money they'd spent decades accumulating. They kept working an extra 2 years, not because they needed more money, but because using what they had felt too complicated. That's the hidden cost of saving more without planning how to use it. Another overlooked issue is inflation. People often assume that saving more will offset rising costs. But inflation doesn't just reduce purchasing power, it increases uncertainty. When expenses slowly rise year after year, retirees start questioning whether their spending is sustainable. Without a clear framework, even modest inflation feels threatening. Saving more doesn't solve that. Planning for how spending adjusts does. I've watched retirees track their expenses obsessively, watching every line item creep upward. Groceries that used to cost $400 per month now cost $500.
So if we put the
insurance that was $300 is now $400.
That sounds wonderful,
Utilities
dear.
that were
I like
stable
that
for
very
years suddenly increase.
If we put the
Each individual increase feels small,
That sounds
but
wonderful,
collectively
dear. I
they
like that
create
very
doubt.
much.
Am I spending too much? Should I cut back?
We get the morning sun.
Will this pattern
That sounds
continue?
Wonderful, dear.
A
I like that
retiree with
very much.
$800,000 who understands inflation and has built adjustments into their plan
That sounds
feels more
wonderful,
secure
dear.
than a
I like that
retiree with
very much.
$1.2 million who hasn't. Because the first person has clarity.
That
The
sounds
second person
wonderful,
only has a
dear.
bigger
I
number
like that
and the
very
same
much.
uncertainty. There's also a psychological side that rarely gets discussed. When people focus on accumulating more, they delay confronting the reality of retirement decisions. They postpone thinking about trade-offs. They avoid defining priorities. They assume more money will give them unlimited flexibility. But no retirement has unlimited flexibility. There are always constraints: time, health, energy, risk tolerance. Ignoring those realities doesn't remove them. It just delays the moment they become unavoidable. I've met people who worked 3 extra years, saved another $200,000, and then realized they'd sacrificed time they couldn't get back. They retired at 68 instead of 65. Those 3 years could have been spent traveling while their health was better, visiting grandchildren while they were young, enjoying retirement while energy was higher. That time is gone. And the extra money didn't meaningfully change their retirement experience. What they needed wasn't more money. It was confidence in what they already had. This is why some retirees feel relief when they finally stop chasing bigger numbers. They shift their focus. Instead of asking, "How much more do I need?" they ask, "How does this actually work?" They clarify their income sources. They separate essential expenses from optional ones. They understand where flexibility exists and where it doesn't. That clarity reduces stress far more effectively than another year of saving. It changes behavior. Spending becomes intentional instead of fearful. Decisions become grounded instead of reactive. Market movements feel less personal. Not because risk disappears, but because risk is understood. I've seen this shift happen many times. Someone comes in feeling inadequate despite having significant savings. They're convinced they need to work longer, save more, delay retirement. We build a structured plan. We clarify their income. We define their spending levels. We address their specific concerns with concrete numbers. And suddenly, the anxiety lifts. Not because their balance changed, but because they finally understood what their balance could do. That understanding is what they were missing all along. Saving more can be helpful, but only when it's paired with structure. Without structure, saving more just increases the size of an unsolved problem. The retirees who feel most at ease are rarely those with the highest balances. They are the ones who know how their money supports their life. They know what they can spend confidently. They know what adjustments are possible. They know which scenarios truly matter. That knowledge creates peace of mind, and it's available at many different savings levels. This doesn't mean people should stop saving. It means saving should not be the only strategy. Clarity matters. Flexibility matters. Understanding matters. Without those, no amount of money will ever feel like enough. The goal isn't to accumulate the biggest possible number. The goal is to build a retirement you can live with confidence. And confidence comes from understanding, not from endlessly adding more. In future videos, we'll explore how retirees shift from accumulation to confidence, how planning replaces guesswork, and how people stop letting uncertainty control their decisions. No fear, no pressure, just clarity. Because retirement success isn't about endlessly saving more. It's about finally understanding how what you've saved actually works.